So far away, Lucas. We're kicking it old school today because my blinds fell down.
That means, though, that you've had a green screen there the entire time and just decided to not use it.
I have indeed, yes. How very fiend of me, yes. For all those fans out there who were disappointed that the green screen was no longer in videos, it was always in videos, it was just under my bed. And now it's behind me. So, let's talk about football.
Wait, you want to talk about football?
Yes, I want to talk about, Lucas, though, specifically the most fabulous football player. So I think I'm combining two of your favourite interests here. Because you are a fan of football, right? You're Liverpool, like FC, right? Because you're from there.
Yeah. I always grew up being a Liverpool fan. My father and his father before him.
So you do enjoy football, but you also enjoy things that are fabulous, right? And unapologetically so.
I do indeed, yes.
So today we're talking about both of those things combined into one man.
Halfback, passes to center, back to wing, back to center, center holds it, holds it, holds it!
In the world of association football, I have to call it that because if I call it football, like 90% of the world, Americans in the audience will get mad. It's football though, right? You kick a ball with your foot, it's football.
However, the phrase soccer is actually of an English invention because it's an eventual shortening and then nickname of association football.
Yeah, but both are valid, but I know Americans get annoyed when you call it football, even though their version of football is not what literally the rest of the world calls it, right? And I know that American football is quite popular, although I will counter that by saying I know that the Super Bowl this year had the highest viewership of any sporting event ever. 90% of the people watching that tuned in to watch Kendrick Lamar call Drake a paedophile, then immediately switch off.
Yeah, and I've enjoyed NFL from a distance in terms of especially through the Madden games every now and then. But yeah, it's one of those. A lot of people want to see the Super Bowl halftime show, not necessarily the Super Bowl.
Yes, and I've watched a couple of NFL games in my time, and the thing that struck me is just how many ads there are. To the point where, I remember literally there was 1 second of play where just the ball went in someone's hands and they took a knee, and it's then an ad played. And I was like, oh my God. And I remember watching it and I turned to my friend who I was watching it with, is this the same sport that Americans have the goal to say has more action than football, which is 45 straight minutes of play, usually broken up with a couple of minutes of stoppage when someone gets injured or when the ball goes out of play, when they throw it immediately back into play and keep playing. There's no way that a sport where people can literally move 1 foot in 2 seconds and they run an ad is something they claim is more interesting. Just because there's more goals get scored technically on paper.
There's more points, right?
There's more points,
but it's scoring game.
But that's not the reason you're watching sport, right? Obviously, the goals are very interesting, exciting to watch, but a game that ends 0-0 can still be just as exciting as a game that ends 5-0 or 5-3 or 10-9, right? Because you're still seeing the skill of the people playing on display, right? That's what you're watching it for, right?
It can be, but don't get me wrong, like any sport, there are also many boring matches.
Of course there are, yeah, because there's thousands of them played every single year. And speaking of not scoring goals, in the world of football, the role of goalkeeper is one normally reserved for gangly ladder men that are about 9 foot long when they dive. Information that apparently wasn't passed on to one Jorge Campos, a man who made up for his lack of height with an abundance of swagger. So are you familiar, Lucas, with the name Jorge Campos?
You say goalkeeper, and I don't remember the name, but this doesn't happen to be the goalkeeper that does the scorpion kick, is it?
That was another footballer, and I'll put a clip in and credit to the guy who did the scorpion kick, because that is an amazing save. Is that the best save in the history of football? It might be.
That is quite the most remarkable piece of goalkeeping I have ever seen. Extraordinary piece of work by Higuita.
Obviously, he clearly saw, this is an easy opportunity to show off. It wasn't a particularly challenging shot. It was more a showcase of his abilities. But yes.
Have you heard as well the story behind that is the guy thought it was out of play? He thought the ball was offside, so he did that to take the piss. And when they told him the ball was onside, and if you missed that, it would have gone in and we lost the match, he's like, oh, sorry. So no, he was the guy who had the massive afro, right? And everyone always joked like that's how he saved goals. He was like 90% afro.
I can't remember if there's afro or like a big perm or something, but yeah, he did have fabulous hair.
Yeah, and we're not talking about that goalkeeper today, we're talking about Jorge Campos. And he's noteworthy for being one of the shortest goalkeepers to ever play at a professional level. Specifically, he played for like the Mexico international team, as well as like some other big name teams, including like LA Galaxy, I think, which is where just like, retired footballers who want a couple more million go to play, right?
Not anymore. That's more like the Saudi league now. But yes, that was famously where like David Beckham went to go just piss away a load of money.
I think Zlatan Ibrahimovic went there for a little bit, right? Another player we've talked about on the channel before, who's like known for his abundance of swagger. But Jorge Campos stood about 5'7" tall, which is pretty short, but is especially short for a goalkeeper, where the average height of a goalkeeper in professional league football is 6'3".
I was about to say, it's the equivalent of trying to be a basketballer.
Guys, we suck. Yeah, man, my grandmother played better than I did.
At least you guys are still tall. I'm nothing now. Just another short guy.
Yeah, and there are a handful of basketball players who have played at the professional level while being notably, markedly shorter than the average. We're not talking about those today, but there are examples of it. And some of those could even dunk the basketball, which I think is like more impressive than like Shaq dunking it, right?
Yeah, like Shaq just lifts his arm up. It's not
like Yao Ming. It's just puts the ball straight in. But in regards to like football, goalkeepers are generally very, very tall because they have to stop a ball this big from going into a 20-foot wide net.
Mm-hmm.
And essentially, like the average height of a association football goalkeeper is about 6'3". That position on the pitch requires you to stop balls being kicked at a quantifiable percentage the speed of sound by men with legs powerful enough to decapitate a horse.
Oh! Right in Ratchet's crown jewel. It'll take more than magic sponge to take this thing out of that, Bob.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? It's maths. It's simple. It's like the more of a goal that you take up, the easier it's going to be to stop things going in it. It's like, look at like ice hockey, right? Where just 80% of the goal is just covered by the goalie with all the kit on.
We're just going to get like the biggest guy possible, right? And again, that's another sport where shorter men have been known to dominate, the most notable being Wayne Gretzky.
Soon the records he was breaking were his own. The doubters were gone. Wayne Gretzky had earned his nickname, the Great One.
He was a very slight man, but he was one of the most dominant players in the history of the sport, to the point where, like, I think like fantasy leagues, like NHL, they had to separate Wayne Gretzky into Wayne Gretzky and Wayne Gretzky assists. And it's like the only player they've ever done that for. Like, he was that good that there was no reason not to have him on your fantasy team. It's like, well, fuck it, it's Wayne Gretzky assists or Wayne Gretzky goals. You can't have both. He's too good.
Yeah, like, I don't know too much about ice hockey, but I know that just Wayne Gretzky absolutely dominated that sport.
To the point where I think it's like the area behind the goal. And one of the reasons I watched an ice hockey game yesterday, and it will never stop cracking me up, that ice hockey is like the only sport where you're allowed to go behind the goal. And it seems so broken that you can do that. And like one of the things that Wayne Gretzky was very good at was going behind the goal and then like sweeping it back into the net. Or passing it to a player who could like do that. And that area became known as Gretzky's office.
Gave it behind the net to Gretzky. Gretzky looks in front. He's got Curry there for a moment. Now he's got Donnelly. Gretzky to Donnelly. He scores! It's
like Gretzky's in his office and he will see you now. Whoop! Straight the fuck in, right? But
it is...
No, go.
It is such a bizarre thing to see when the main sport that I watch is soccer/football and just... The offside rule is such a big thing, right?
And Lucas, would you like to explain the offside rule for perhaps people who aren't familiar with it? Because I've never understood why people find this confusing. It's just, it stops you from just having players stood next to the net and goal greasing, right? It's a very obvious rule that needs to happen, otherwise the sport itself would be ruined by players taking advantage of the fact there's no rule that stops them from just standing next to the net and waiting for a pass to just tap in.
Yeah, generally speaking, the concept is that you're not allowed to just stand behind the entire defensive line and get a ball passed to you. And if the goalkeeper's ahead of the defensive line for whatever, it's like the last person becomes like, the stand-in for the goalkeeper in that situation. It can get a little bit weird at times, and there are obvious like wrinkles within there, but just the concept is that you're not allowed to just stand behind all of the players on the field and wait for a ball to get kicked to you.
Yes, the exception being if the ball is currently being passed, right, and then you can run past the players, and there's a great deal of discretion that goes down to the referees in the decision. But as Lucas mentioned, the main idea behind it is that you can't have the strikers, the attacking side of a team, just wait at the back next to the opponent's goal and have the defensive line to pass to them, because it wouldn't be fair, it'd be boring, and if you were allowed to do it, every player in every league would just do that. Like that would become football, right? If there was no offside rule, 90% of football games would be 8 players stood at the end next to the goal, right, of each team, just waiting for someone to kick it to them.
Yeah, just get someone in the defence that can kick the ball as far as possible up the field.
Yeah, and it's just one of those rules that exists to make the game more interesting, or I guess more accurately, stop it from being very boring. And this is something we talked about in the past in regards to basketball, where initially when basketball was becoming a professional organised sport, there was no rule against, there was no shot clock, which is you're not allowed to hold the ball for a certain amount of time, because it was deemed that, players were going to want to pass, right? Of course they're going to want to keep passing the ball to score. Until one team realised, hey, wait a minute, if we're ahead, there's no reason for us to keep passing. And I believe this was a thing devised to stop one player, Jorge Mikan, who was the first tall man of basketball, because weirdly, at some point in basketball history, they didn't think being tall would make you good at basketball. And Jorge Mikan was 6'10".
As a result of Mikan's dominance in the paint, the NBA widened the 3-second lane from 6 to 12 feet.
The low post at those days was low because the 3-second lane was only 6 feet wide. That means that Mikan stationed himself 3 feet from the basket.
And to play behind him was death. I mean, you couldn't stop him.
Because for some reason back then the thinking was that tall people couldn't play basketball. So when the team got Jorge Mikan, who was 6'10", and he started dominating by just standing in front of the net and holding his hand up, or walking over to the net and just putting the ball in, no one knew how to counter it. And one team eventually realised, well, there's actually no rule that says we have to pass the ball. And in fact, there's a rule against taking the ball off us. So if we get 1 point ahead, 1 point, and then just stand with the ball, there's nothing the other team can do. And it got to the point where the teams playing against Jorge Mikan would get 1 point, and then they would literally sit on the ball for the entire match.
Along with the other rules changes, Mikan also had a lot to do with the invention of the 24-second clock. During one game in 1950, the Pistons decided the only way they could beat the Lakers was to hold onto the ball and not let George have it. They did end up winning by a final score of 19-18. And that game was pointed to as evidence of the need for a shot clock.
Because there was no rule against doing that, and there was no way for the opposing team to get the ball back without committing a foul. And fans obviously got pissed off, this is boring, but they respond, well, there's no rule against it, so they devised a rule of the shot clock. You can't hold on to the ball for more than 30 seconds. It's not fair. The ball has to be in constant motion.
And similar to the rule of travelling, right? Where you can't hold the ball for more than 2 steps, I think it is. But the idea one person could just grab the ball and just run around in fucking circles.
Run around, yeah. But again, there's a lot of discretion that goes into that. If you take a couple of steps to go into a jump or to a pass or something like that, and again, it's usually the referee has final say on those matters. But yeah, that's another example of a rule that has to exist to make the sport interesting. Because otherwise, just like in all elements of competition, if there was no rule against it, the players would optimise the fun out of it. It's like playing an online game, isn't it? If there's no rule against doing a specific thing, players will optimise the fun out of it to get the most points possible, to put their thumb on the scale as much as they can.
People really like winning, Karl.
They do, and especially in organised sport, where winning can result in millions and millions of dollars.
Yeah, that's the thing is, as you mentioned, in a game like Call of Duty, right, people will sit there and camp and spawn trap and stuff to just take the fun out of the game for the sake of winning. That's when it's just fucking quick play online. When there's millions of pounds or dollars or whatever on the line, yeah, I can understand why all of a sudden people want to try and figure out the easiest way to win.
There's also the fact that if it's not explicitly against the rules, there's no incentive to not abuse that system until you're specifically told not to. In regards to online gaming, I think of the game Dragon Ball Sparking Zero, where Bandai Namco held a tournament for that game of like, oh yeah, we're expecting people to, lots of fun characters, lots of flashy stuff for our audience to see. A couple of players quickly realised that if you pick an android in that game, you have effectively unlimited ki. And the systems in that game allow you to constantly fly up and fly down as a defensive, evasive manoeuvre. The androids can do that forever because they have unlimited ki. And someone realised that if you just pick an android and just do that the entire match, you will win by timeout every single time. Because if you pick a team of 5 characters who all can do that and just spend the entire 10-minute match never getting hit, you will win because you will technically have more life than your opponent. And you can say as a spectator that's very boring, but can you blame the players who've got money on the line? Right? You do what you do to get a win.
Yeah, you do. I don't blame the players, but
you blame the game. Yeah. That's the rule, right? You don't blame the player. Blame the game.
Yeah, and it was awful to watch as a spectator, I will admit.
Yeah, and that has happened in real world sporting competition time and time again. And then there is consistently this fine line that organisers have to walk of. We need to ensure that skill is the ultimate deciding factor in the winner, but also, hey, money's on the line. Games need to be interesting.
Yeah, and there's no real rule against it because it's just tactics, but there's a reason that the term park the bus exists when it comes to football. It's just get one goal ahead, and park the bus just means basically send everyone back to the defensive line and make sure that you just defend that one goal lead.
Yeah, and it's a frustrating tactic to watch and to play against, but you can't blame the players for doing it because it's not explicitly... There's no rule that says you have to shoot the ball. And do you have a favourite tactic like that in sport, not necessarily football? Because I'm a really big fan of when we said a team in football's winning, and they do the thing they take just a little bit too long to do everything because they know that it's in their best interest to not, for example, the ball's out of play. Oh, I'll get it. And they just do that really crap little dad jog, like when your dad's in Morrison's, he does a little jog.
Mbappe's control with his hands is rather worse than his control with his feet as he deliberately threw the ball away and gets a yellow card.
Because they know the 10 seconds or so extra it takes them to go get that ball is 10 seconds they don't have to defend the goal. And there's rules against that, isn't there? There's rules against time wasting, but you can't force the player to run. You can only tell them not to stand still, so they'll walk as slow as possible.
That's the thing, right? Is say for example, if a goalkeeper is taking a goal kick from their point, is just there is literal time wasting rules where they're not allowed to just sit there unimpeded for 30 seconds watching the clock go down. If I think they've got 6 seconds to kick the ball or something.
Yeah,
but
and it's 6 seconds give or take. Again, there's a lot of discretion goes into play here. It's they're not going to, for example, yell at a goalkeeper taking a sip of water. But if he went to my leg hurts a little bit and he takes a bit too long to do that, it's hey, you're time wasting. Stop it. Kick the ball.
And one of my favourite forms of that is when they will just take the ball right into the corner and just put their back against the corner.
Oh, that's so good, right? What do you do?
Because the majority of the time, the person trying to get the ball back will inevitably just kick it out of bounds by accident and give the ball back to the team who are time wasted.
Likewise, I think it's a great tactic where players will kick the ball into an opposing player so it bounces off them out of bounds. Because how it works in football is whichever team kicks the ball out of bounds, they give either a throw-in or a corner kick to the opposing team. And just the fact that it doesn't take into account that you might have done so accidentally.
Yeah, if someone kicks the ball into you and it deflects out of bounds, then the person who, deflected is the last person to touch the ball.
Yeah, likewise, I'm a huge fan of the wall, which is when in football they're taking a free kick. It's you can if you want. I don't think you don't have to do it. Some teams don't choose to do it, but you can just get all of your tallest players to stand in a line in front of the net to stop, and they all jump up at the last second, right? To stop them. And I think that is such an interesting tactic because that arose organically. That's not a thing that's taught. It's just, it makes sense, right? They've got a free kick on goal. Why not get 10 players to stand in a line in front of the net?
Well, yeah, generally it's that they'll stand like 10 either feet or meters, I can't remember.
Yeah, there's a rule about how close you can stand. For example, you can't stand 1 foot in front of the player, you have to give them some room, but you can go to you've got to stand 10 foot away. I'm going to stand exactly 10 foot away with 10 of my mates in a line or with our hands up, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is just they've literally incorporated, at least in the Premier League, spraying lines onto the field of you can't encroach past this point, because the ref used to set up the free kick, tell the people where to stand, and you'd see them
slowly nudge forward,
just
right?
Edge forward and forward, just encroaching.
I think it was a famous match. I'll try and find footage of it where it was during the World Cup, I think, where one of the teams didn't know about that rule. So every time the opposing team went to take a free kick, their opposing team would just sprint at them at full pelt the second the whistle was blown. Because it wasn't a rule in their league, but they'd got to the world stage where the rules are formalised and didn't realise you're not allowed to do that. And it's why not? It's the most effective tactic possible.
Yeah, I can't remember for the life of me what team it was, but yeah, they just seemingly didn't have that rule in their league, as you say, and they just were fuck it, just send everyone straight at the free kick. Why not?
You see them do that and how effective it is, and you realise why you're not allowed to do it, because it's too effective. The idea of a free kick is that it gives that team an advantage because they were fouled, or it's a penalty against the team that the free kick's been taken against. And if you're allowed to just run straight at the guy, it's not really a penalty, right?
Yeah.
Because you can basically just mitigate any risks to your to your goal line. And it reminds me a little bit of fencing. Are you familiar with fencing at all?
A little bit.
Positions. Play.
So have you ever wondered in fencing why they might hold one leg forward and prance forward with the sword? Have you ever wondered why they do that?
I would presume that just means that you're angling some of your body away from being able to be hit.
Well, yeah, you minimise the amount of area that's available. But the reason why they walk that way is because there is a rule in fencing from putting one foot in front of the other one. Because fencers at some point in time realised the absolute most effective tactic in every situation was the second that the match starts, sprint towards your opponent and stab them.
Just
run at full pelt and do it. And there was no way to stop fencers from doing that.
Okay, bad guy, cop, right? 1 foot. Okay. Yeah. You die in 1 second. Bad guy, cop, 15 feet. Bad guy kills you in 2 seconds. Bad guy, cop, 50 feet.
Then you got time.
Because why would you not do that? It's the single mode. It always works. There's no way to defend against someone running at you and stabbing you. Right? And the only way you can count is to try and run and stab them before they get you. Well, it kind of makes the sport look stupid, so you're not allowed to put 1 foot in front of the other anymore. So what players do instead is they stand really, really far back like that and dance forward, which looks even stupider. But
I was going to say, I don't think that they solved the problem of looking stupid if that's what they were worried about. I think just make the stage that you take combat on, just make that longer and don't place the rule against sprinting, just watch it happen.
Yeah, and that's the thing, if they ever remove that as a rule, it would immediately become the dominant tactic because it's too strong. But we move back now to Jorge Campos, and he possessed formidable athleticism and was able to propel himself, from one side of the net to the other with his giant man thighs.
He just had moon boots on the entire time.
Shots that other goalkeepers that were a foot taller would struggle to get a fingertip on, he could dive and grab in his hands and throw back out of the net in midair. He was that acrobatic. He could jump a dozen feet through the air, he could run with cheetah-like speed and was able to turn a corner like a gazelle with its dick stuck in a ceiling fan. The man was actually ridiculous. And this made him a terrifying, formidable presence in net, or anywhere within several hundred feet of the net. Because one of the tactics, speaking of, why doesn't everyone do this? In sports, he was one of the first goalkeepers to realise there's no rule about the goalkeeper having to stay in the net. Because normally, you don't need to have a rule against goalkeepers staying in net because it'd be stupid to not have a goalkeeper in the net, right? Because, again, people don't know, the goalkeeper in football is the only one who's allowed to put their hands on the ball, but only when they're within that specific area, right? Anywhere outside of that, they can't. And you know that it's a rule that goalkeepers can only put their hands on the ball in the box, because otherwise it would be prudent for every goalkeeper to pick up the ball and run into the back of the net, right?
Well,
if it wasn't a rule,
someone did it at some point to invent that rule. It's like, it's always that thing, right? As you see a sign on the wall saying "Don't do stupid thing," it's because someone did that before.
thing. And as a result, most goalkeepers stay within the penalty box. Sometimes they'll stray out of it. Like, one of my favourite things in football is when there's like 30 seconds left and it's a draw, and there's like a corner or something like that, and you'll see the goalkeeper stood like in the box, because, well, there's only 30 seconds left, all or nothing, right? But when they spoon it or they miss, when you see the goalkeeper have to run all the way back.
And there's been times where the goalkeeper scored a corner kick in the last second. Like, there's been times where that's fumbled and someone scored from like 70 metres away.
Yeah,
because there was no goalkeeper.
There was no goalkeeper there because, you know, the team that they scored on, they gambled and they lost. And in regards to goalkeeper scoring, Campos was very, very good at that, because he was also trained as a striker, which, for anyone unfamiliar with football, is the exact opposite of what a goalkeeper is. And because of this, managers for the teams he played on struggled to find a place to put him on the pitch because he excelled at both roles. It's like, well, he's a fantastic goalkeeper, but he's also a really good striker. Also, this is football, so it cost us like £3 million to sign him. Where do we put him? And the answer usually was, well, where do we need him?
Yeah, right.
And it's to the point where, like, some managers would take him out of the net when they were losing to put him in the striker position and replace him with another goalkeeper because he was that fucking good.
God, like, how would that feel, though, being that striker being taken off the pitch? It's like, you're being taken off the pitch so the goalkeeper can come up and take your place.
And here's the thing, Lucas, it's not like he was good. He was, like, so good that he could occasionally score overhead scissor kicks, aka the coolest fucking thing to do in football.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
Like, is the scissor kick the coolest way to score a goal? It's either that or it's the back heel, right? What's cooler?
Oh,
the back heel is so effortless, right?
There's the back heel. There's also when the goalkeeper like rushes out and the players just chip the ball over.
Or like
the
Rainbow
goalkeeper.
flips it over, right? Just over and like taps it into the back at net. Maybe a volley as well. A volley's a really satisfying one to see as well. Like when I used to play like football in school, landing a volley always felt so fucking cool. And volleys when you get it right in midair, and you feel like such a badass when you connect with the ball in midair.
Yeah, because most of the time you just half connect with it and spoon your shot, right?
Yeah, like a dickhead. But what about if you don't know? What about if you actually get it all the way in and girls are watching? Then what, Lucas?
I don't like that terminology that you use. But okay, I'm going to say that, you know, bicycle kicks, scissor kick, whatever you want to call them, they're two different things. But like acrobatic finishing kicks to score a goal, they're the coolest way to score in football.
Well, how about a diving header?
I like a diving header because you putting your head on the line, but I do think that doing a bicycle kick is just cooler.
Well, I only mention that because Campos also scored like that. He would also save the ball in ways that were unnecessary but otherwise look cool. For example, he's one of like the goalkeepers who started the trend of punching the ball out of the net.
Oh, fair.
So rather than catching, because catching it is always going to be the most sensible thing to do because you have complete and utter control of the ball and the other team can't kick it. I was like, well, fuck that. I'm going to like just fucking well it out the net. Why not?
Well, that's the thing is, it begins the counter-attack a lot quicker if you can just punch it away, right?
Yeah. Also, like I said, the diving header, when he did that, the rival goalkeeper was so annoyed they kicked him up the arse.
So, Karl, what you're telling me is that there is a person out there that's like 5'3" that's really good at like bicycle kicks and being in goal. And that means that this person is basically the antithesis to Peter Crouch.
Yes, and if we're talking about Peter Crouch, aka the Ladder Man, we have to mention one of my favourite quotes attributed to a footballer, which is Peter Crouch, like 6'7" defender, right?
No, he was a striker.
He was a striker, and like he was teamed up with like one of the shortest guys in the league, right? But him being so tall for a player allowed him to be really good at headers because like he was so tall that he could just boop straight to back at net.
But then every now and then, and you know, I know as a Liverpool fan, he also played for a couple of other teams, but every now and then he would just pull out a ridiculous bicycle kick goal, and it's like, that is a man that is so tall and gangly that, like, it looks insane that he can even do a bicycle kick.
Yes. He also, as well, we've got to mention when he did the robot, right? Where he scored a goal, was it the Euros or the World Cup, and just did the robot, which commanded his proportions, made him look really funny. But he has one of my favourite quotes. He was asked, "So Peter, what do you think you'd be if you weren't a professional football player?" And he looked the interviewer dead in the eye and went, "A virgin." And that's my second favourite quote from a footballer. And the first one will always and forever be when Wayne Rooney, like Manchester United, was going to play Scunthorpe United, and was asked, "So, Wayne, how do you feel about playing in Scunthorpe?" And he went, "I didn't know B&Q did stadiums." And that just always slays me, because like, Scunthorpe is where I was born.
Oh, God. And I love the quotes where it's like, oh, well, you know, if we'd have scored more goals, then we would have won, and shit like that. It's like, yeah, no shit.
Yeah, like, footballers aren't known for their intelligence. Like, no, like, and I guess we're mentioning Wayne Rooney. Got to talk about one of my favourite tweets, which is like Wayne Rooney bemoaning being a footballer paid £50,000 a week. When people don't know how hard it is to be a footballer. I've got to wake up every morning and eat 3 bowls of pasta. Top response: Wayne, for what you get paid a week, I'd wake up every morning and shove it up my ass. And I think that just sums it up, right?
It does, yeah.
But bringing it back to Campos, I mentioned that he was not just short, he was exceptionally baller in all senses of the word, because he had a very distinct sense of style. So something that was the case in football for a while, and is sadly no longer the case, is that goalkeepers had to distinguish themselves from the other players on their team, so that, at a glance, a player on the opposing team knows that that is the goalkeeper, and as a result, the goalkeeper can do things other players can't, like, for example, picking up the ball. But players need to be able to differentiate the goalkeeper from a regular player at a glance. Most teams will give the goalkeeper long-sleeve shirts, that's in a slightly different colour or style, but for a couple of years, there was actually no rule that said goalkeepers had to do that. They could actually wear whatever they wanted. And you know, like, speaking of rules that no one bothers to check up on, or no one takes advantage of, so it doesn't become a rule.
Mm-hmm.
Campos was keenly aware that he could actually wear whatever he wanted as a goalkeeper, so went out of his way to get the most garish, ugly shirts he could, specially made for him, and then got them made in sizes that were 5 times too big. And I've sent you an example now, Luke's on Discord, and you tell me if that is not the swaggiest man you have ever seen.
Oh my God, yeah.
Is that not the swaggiest thing you've ever seen?
Oh God, I love that kind of trend that must maybe followed from this guy. Just the goalkeepers having the most god-ugly jumpers of all time.
Well, it's not a jumper, that's just a shirt. But he ordered it 5 sizes too big because it was funny. And all of the shirts that Campos wore were custom designed by him and inspired by surfing outfits he used to see in his hometown of Acapulco. And he would wear them just so that players would always know where he was, but also because it was funny. Right? Of like, oh, you've got to make it look even shorter. Like, he's wearing an outfit 5 sizes too big for him. So it makes it like a little kid. And he's saving all the goals, and then he runs out of the goal and scores. It's like, what is this guy doing?
It's the classic, right, of like the little kid that gets bought the suit that's 3 sizes too big so they grow into it later.
And just, he would do that specifically because he knew it'd be annoying. And there's no rule that said he couldn't dress like that, so he did. And nowadays, there are specific rules about the uniform that goalkeepers are allowed to wear, where it has to be in line with what the rest of the team is wearing, which is a shame, because I would love to see someone start rocking that look again.
And there was also another team that got done, I think it was in a World Cup, for having no sleeves on their shirts.
Do you remember Nigeria's kit for one of the World Cups, where it sold out instantly because they made a kit that was actually really good looking? And most people were buying it just to wear out to the club because it was a really good-looking kit.
No, I don't remember that.
Yeah. I'll put the picture up anyway of the kit because it looks swag as fuck. But yeah, it's like that Nigeria sold out of their home kit because everyone's like, man, it's just a really good-looking shirt. I want one of those.
I do think that, football kits in the Premier League look fine, but I do find it funny how just awfully garish they were back in the 90s.
I miss it, right? I miss how ugly the shirts were. Because they were ugly in a way that's interesting. Not ugly in a way it's like, I don't want to wear that.
They're not exactly stuff that I'd want to wear, but they're visually interesting to look at when you're watching football, right?
It's the kind of thing I can imagine, like a girl wearing and pulling off. If she wore it, like, you know, ironically, I don't think a guy would pull it off. But like, they look visually interesting. Also, they were made of like nicer material. Because I've worn a football shirt, a modern football shirt, once for like one World Cup. Man, people pay 50 quid for this. This feels awful.
Yeah, generally speaking, rugby shirts are made of much nicer material than football shirts are.
We mentioned like ice hockey earlier, and like ice hockey shirts as well. Like ice hockey shirts, I think look really good because like they're deliberately oversized because they must be worn over, like, you know, the pads. So they have like when someone's wearing like a hockey jersey, it has a distinct look to it. Likewise, I'm a big fan of like baseball jerseys. Specifically, our mutual friend's favourite team, the Hiroshima Carp. I think they have a really interesting jersey design. But in that vein, Lucas, have you got like a favourite like sporting team outfit or anything like that?
Well, actually, like literally the day of the Super Bowl, I was working in the restaurant I work in, and one of the customers came in wearing like a mesh shirt for one of the NFL teams, the 49ers. And I was like, man, I want to buy one of those shirts because that just looked fashionable and nice.
He just looks like a nice shirt, yeah. So that friend of mine's really into hockey and he's got a San Jose Sharks jersey. And that's it's a really nice shade of blue and it's got a shark on it. It's like doubly rad.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's like some that just look bad, right? Remember like the Washington Redskins, like was said, hey, that name's kind of fucked up, change it. And for a little bit they were just called Washington Football Team.
Oh really?
Yeah, and I'm in agreement with a lot of fans of they should have just been called the Washington Football Team because it's so fucking funny. But they just wore like a really generic uniform, it's Washington Football Team. I was like, that is so shit. It goes all the way around into being cool again.
Yeah, it's like, I get that a lot of people have emotional attachments to their team, and like the team name being changed is a bit weird, but also just in retrospect, it should have been changed way sooner.
Well, they have like, I think it was last week tonight, either covered this or did it, where they got in a bunch of like Redskin fans and they bring them into a room with some like Native Americans, and you immediately, so these are the fans who wanted to defend the use of the name, and you see every single one of them instantly go, oh fuck, because they realise, oh fuck, now I'm gonna have to like actually talk to someone who this affects, and every single one's like trying to cover like the jersey logo and stuff like that, and they've all got their faces painted with it on, like, oh fuck, this looks so bad.
It's like, oh wait, no, yeah, we were the bad guys.
It just reminds me of my favourite bit in like Parks and Rec with like Ken Otote, where it's like Joe Jam, where he's like, well, I think you should now wear this American headdress. And Jam's like, well, I'm not going to do that because that would be very offensive. And Ken just like, would it, white man? It's just...
I love that character.
He's so like... good, right?
Put on these authentic Wamapoke headdresses and dance around the table.
Absolutely not. That sounds highly offensive.
Does it, white man?
No.
Taking the absolute piss, like when he, I think it's when he cleanses the Harvest Festival, right? And he ends with just going, Scooby, Dooby, Doo.
I love that guy as well because he has some of the best like talking head segments. Like, if I know one thing, because he threatens to curse something, right? It's like, if there's one thing I know about white people, they love Matchbox 20 and they hate curses.
There are two things I know about white people. They love Rachel Ray, and they are terrified of curses.
Well, just his delivery of just like, is it, white man? He's just so fucking good.
Absolutely not. That sounds highly offensive.
Does it, white man?
Oh god, yeah, what a great character.
Oh man, yeah, well, maybe we'll talk about Parks and Rec someday over on Wiki Weekends, but man, yeah, it's like, speaking of jerseys, I would not wear that one. I would wear one that's the Washington Football Team.
God, I just want Campos's shirt that you sent me.
Isn't that rad as fuck? Right? That's like, he's so shit, he goes all the way around to being cool.
Yeah.
And because he's like, he's owning it, he's styling and or profiling at the same time. Not to mention as well, he's cool as fuck.
He just looks cool in that shirt.
He's owning it. It's the same thing. Like, you can look cool in any outfit as long as you own it, except for a Washington Redskins jersey. So I'll find the clip because it is fucking hilarious. Like, 'cause you see them all going like, yeah, we're really going. Like, as soon as they lock eyes with the Native American people, like, oh fuck no.